What's up, YouTube? This is Herb. If you come across this video and you like the content, you like the conversation in which I'm sparking, support me by subscribing to the channel. This is Herb Vernacular TV, being blunt and sparking conversation. Sparking conversation. Imperium Prerogative. The Imperium, the Empire, the U.S. Empire, spheres of influence, great power competition, all is at play. President Donald J. Trump has ordered Venezuela skies to be closed. Over the last 3 or so months, the U.S. has gathered military assets right over there on the coast of Venezuela. So many military artilleries and equipment has been put right on the border of Venezuela. The psychological warfare is downing down on Caracas. The psychological warfare is downing down on Maduro. Imperium Prerogative. The United States, from its perspective of its moral doctrine, feels like the Western Hemisphere is theirs. That no other international power should be able to have any advantages than the United States within the Western Hemisphere. That is why the United States is pushing back on China, on Russia relationship with Venezuela. As you saw, Trump talking about the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal. He wanted to name the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. You know what I'm saying? So Trump want to change the dynamic within the Western Hemisphere. Great power competition has surpassed the war on terrorism. In President Donald J. Trump's first administration, he said that his national security strategy is changing than that of Barack Obama and George W. Bush. George W. Bush waged the war on terrorism after 9/11, and Barack Obama somewhat carried on along with the war on terrorism, even though he pivoted to the Asia Pacific. However, when Trump came to power, he changed his national security strategy. He said that great power competition has surpassed the war on terrorism. As you see, China and Taiwan, Ukraine and Russia. So now, in Trump's strategy, he understands that great power right now is flexing their muscle, trying to conquer new markets, trying to conquer new territory, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Asia. Trump feels that America needs to have the comparative advantage when it comes to the Western Hemisphere, when it comes to Latin America. China now has infiltrated, in the perspective of Trump, China has infiltrated in Venezuela. The Russians is in Venezuela. You know, President Trump feel like he can press the Trump administration with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They feel like they can press Venezuela because Venezuela is right in their backyard. Venezuela is right in the backyard. So that's why this psychological war on the Maduro government is strengthening. Even though Trump says he's waging war on drugs, the inflow of drugs to the United States, this war is deeper. The United States has always opposed Venezuela and the Bolivarian Revolution with Hugo Chavez. They always wanted to overthrow Chavez. They even overthrew Chavez at one point, but he had to be reinstated. You see, the United States opposes that socialist government. Opposes that Venezuela have great relationship with China, have great relationship with Russia. You understand? Connecting military application with Russia. Venezuela is also a very instrumental member in the rise of the BRICS. So the United States under President Donald Trump, he wants to overthrow the Venezuelan regime of Maduro and install a more favorable regime to Washington. And also, if the United States and its financier Wall Street can get hold of Venezuela. Venezuela is rich in natural resources. It's rich in oil. That's a new market for investment. That's a new market for the United States and Wall Street to also get propped up in this economic downturn within the United States. Trump has declared that Venezuela's skies needs to be closed. The possibility of war brews. It is brewing. This is a psychological warfare that the United States is imposing on Venezuela and its people. You know, the Imperium Prerogative, the moral doctrine. The United States feel like it has to dominate the Western Hemisphere. Russia and China is playing in its backyard, and it must press those countries that is aligning with Russia and China. Venezuela is a BRIC member. So you understand, in the grand scheme of things, the United States looking at what Russia and Ukraine is going through. Ukraine is right within Russia's sphere of influence. That's why Russia said Ukraine cannot join NATO. America and NATO installation cannot be installed in Ukraine. And Russia meant that because Ukraine is right within Russia's sphere of influence. Venezuela is right in the hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere here. There is no other power to challenge the United States, to challenge the empire in the Western Hemisphere. There is no power. So United States and Washington, they feel like they must have the comparative advantage to push back against Russia, to push back against China, to push back against Iran and its relationship in Venezuela, to try to push back against the BRICS, the expansion of the BRICS in South America. Imperium Prerogative. The United States feel like it is its prerogative to control the foreign policy, the things that are going on in this region. That is why President Donald Trump is pressing Venezuela to potentially overthrow that regime. He has the Nobel Peace Prize winner waiting in line to be the leadership of Venezuela. And she already swore allegiance to take the Venezuelan capital to Jerusalem. So it's a lot of underbelly of things is brewing. You know, the U.S. wants access to Venezuela. Even though Maduro have capitulated to Trump, he will give Trump whatever Trump says that he wanted. But Trump want the whole pie. Wall Street want the whole pie. They want everything. They want Venezuela. They want a regime that is favorable to Washington in Venezuela. You understand? So that is why Trump has declared Venezuela's skyways should be closed. It's psychological. There is military feasibility of outbreak of war. The Venezuelan people have been preparing for a long time. Under Hugo Chavez, they have been preparing for a long time for this conflict. To see what's going on in the Middle East. To see what's going on in Gaza. Imperium Prerogative. You understand? They said that the Venezuelan people, the people itself, the militias, hundreds of thousands of people are ready for this fight, to fight the empire. You understand? Imperium Prerogative. U.S. feel like it must dominate that region. It must dominate its hemisphere, the spheres of influence. You know, Trump said it in his first term, his national security strategy. Great power competition has surpassed the war on terrorism. Terrorism, we went after Bush war on terrorism that have bled the country, and its treasure has come to an end. Now we must meet the competitor. We must meet China, whatever is in Taiwan. We must meet Russia, whatever is in Ukraine. We must meet them on this front. We must meet them in Africa. We must meet them in South America. The battle of market, the battle of raw material, the battle of influence, the battle for the discourse of the IMF to be the staple of the day, not the battle, not the discourse of the BRICS, not the discourse of the global South. You understand? The status quo must remain. The empire must continue its domination. The Europeans, the Americans, they must dominate. The Imperium must dominate. They must dominate. So America Imperial Prerogative is what is driving Trump towards pressuring Venezuela that the potential for war is imminent. What would the Venezuela war look like? So many refugees, man, gonna come it's just gonna look terrible. And many refugees are coming from South America because of the hardship, because of the policies, the sanctions of Venezuela, the hardship over there in Latin America. They are coming to the U.S. border. So imagine a war breaking out over there. It's just going to be a catastrophe. But it is the Imperium Prerogative.